If you grew up wearing a cap, or perhaps you might have worn a different head covering. I know some people wore one that looked similar to this, maybe a different, better kind of fabric and a better color. But I digress. If you wore like a cap or a koptu or a head scarf, for us, like it would have involved in the summertime, even like just wearing a summer bonnet over it, or in the wintertime, we would have worn a winter bonnet over it. If you grew up in that culture, you grew up in an entirely different world. Furthermore, even when you speak English, you might use English differently. That is something that people who are providing services to anybody who grew up inside of this kind of culture need to be aware of. Even people who primarily spoke English, but they grew up inside of these communities, might use English differently. Secondly, for us, we spoke Pennsylvania German or Pennsylvania Dutch as our primary language, and English was our secondary language. For me, my therapist that I had that was really trauma informed was able to help me find language to express the things that I had experienced. Now, not to downplay the seriousness, I will also share that I have personally had therapists who told me that the only reason that you are attracted to not men is because you have mommy issues. I've had therapists tell me that the only way that people can heal is through faith. I've had therapists tell me that the scars that I have from the abuse I experienced is SH. I've had therapists tell me that the other only way to heal is through forgiveness. None of that is necessarily true. None of that. And furthermore, it could even complicate the trauma further. That is something that people from these cultures face. And another thing is, if you happen to be a woman or a AFAB person that comes from a community like this, one of the things that we often experience is even men external to the community and people external to the community think that they know more about our life experiences than we do. Even therapists have done that. The first step that we have to do when we want to have a competent therapist often is legitimately we have to educate them about our culture. And that takes an exponential amount of energy. We need to do better in putting out information for people who are actually treating formerly plain clients and how to be better for them so that they can meet those clients where they are. And part of what I have done personally is I decided to fight like hell. I've always been that way. So, because I decided to fight like hell, I fought like hell until I finally got what I wanted. And what that was is there are resources on our website that talk about abuse from a better perspective and incorporate the language barrier into the resources. Those can be used twofold. One, they can be used by therapists or, any kind of person that is trying to provide a service. For example, I've had DV agencies tell me that they were told to refer Plain and Amish women back to their communities for resources, which is not okay. But they could better understand how to serve these survivors by reading those resources, because they can begin to understand that perhaps there is a bigger cultural difference than they thought there was. That's one. Two, they also serve as a way to help educate and fill in some of the missing gaps of information so that we know how to describe the things that we have experienced. Because survivors need to know how to describe the things that they have experienced, and they need language to do that. And then the other thing that I decided to do is do presentations. I have done multiple presentations, and I have done them for state agencies, multiple states, domestic violence agencies, child advocacy centers, agencies that are state agencies that work against SA, but I can't say the name of the agency on here. I am also scheduled to do more presentations for state agencies. But I can't tell you how difficult it was to feel a semblance of hope. I can't describe to you what it can feel like and how hopeless it can feel when it feels like there is nowhere to turn, and it might feel like you're broken and you're unfixable, and when it feels like no matter how hard you try to speak up, it doesn't get heard. That is really difficult to work through. For me, I cannot tell you how you can find resolution. I cannot tell you where and what will be the best tools and resources. I can tell you that trauma is trauma. I can tell you that for me, I find resolution in fighting like hell. And what that looks like for me is something that it might look different for you. I can tell you that I take pride in being able to look at myself in the mirror and be like, I don't hate myself today. It's a good day. I have joy in like being able to live a meaningful life and being able to say like, I get to do all these things that I was told I could never do. I get to have a voice, and I choose to use my voice. And even when it feels like people aren't listening, I can tell you there have been times where I felt like I was all alone and like nobody would hear me and nobody cared. But even when I felt that way, there were still people who were listening, and there were still people who were watching, and there were still people who were learning. And when you start trying to change some of the ways in which society looks at an entire group of people, it is slow, because societal change takes like 20 years to make one small change. And sometimes that feels absolutely hopeless. And when I find myself feeling that way, I need to use my tools and resources, and I need to find my joy in life again. And I'm lucky because I have tools and resources and people around me who remind me that I'm also allowed to rest. And you are also allowed to rest. And you're allowed to take breaks and come back to it when you can. But you know, even if you never come back to it, you have done enough. And how you find peace, that is something that each one of us who has survived trauma has to sort out, even when we might feel like we're a little broken and a little too much for the world.